Coming up next on the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
They are more expensive, they are more beautiful, but they are not more fragile. You can literally lay it on the highway and drive over it with your truck and pick it up and go fishing. And in fact, when I go to shows, one of the first things I do with them is I give up my little casting demos, as I first string out a bunch of line, throw it down on the ground, jump as high as I can and stomp it with my heels 3 times. And then I pick it up and I throw the full fly line out through the tip top.
That was Bill Oyster describing one big bonus with bamboo fly rods, 6 days to perfection, Jimmy Carter, and the trivia challenge today on the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Hey, how you doing today? Thanks for stopping by the show. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time and want to support the podcast, a good way to do that is just click over to one of our sponsors' websites and let them know you heard about us on the show and check out some of their products and some of the things they have going on. And one of those sponsors is Jackson Hole Fly Company, a new kind of online fly shop. They've been designing and manufacturing their own high-quality fly rods, reels, and gear, and over 1,000 fly patterns. You can head over to Jackson right now and get 25% off your first order. That's jhflyco.com/swing to get started right now. That's jhflyco.com/swing to get 25% off your first order. We're also sponsored by Bearvault, who has the perfect solution to keep your provisions secure while heading into the backcountry. Bearvault builds a rugged polycarbonate locking canister that keeps bears and other wild animals out of your stuff. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/Bearvault right now to check out this must-have solution. That's Bearvault, BEARVAULT, to support this podcast and a great secure food storage. Bill Oyster takes us behind the scenes into creating one of the largest bamboo making classes in the country. We hear about the book that kicked off his journey, some of the common mistakes that he sees in his classes, and the 6-day class to bamboo perfection. We've also got a bamboo trivia challenge, a new one on this one, in the middle of this episode, so stay tuned for that. So without further ado, here he is, Bill Oyster from oysterbamboo.com. How's it going, Bill?
Going good. How are you, Dave?
Good. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to put this together. I know Shannen, we've been talking on email, and she's been setting this up, and this has been kind of great to finally get you on the show here. And I know you've been on a number of shows and kind of done a lot of stuff over the year, but we're going to talk about the bamboo rods you make at Oyster Bamboo and how unique some of the stuff you do there at the shop. But before we jump into all that, talk about how you first got into fly fishing, then we'll take into your rods.
How I got into fly fishing. Let's see. So first, my first exposure to fly fishing was as a kid. I lived in Northwest Wyoming and growing up, and I saw a family friend fly fishing. We went fishing, trout fishing, and I was throwing my worms and wrecking the fish. And there's a family friend over there with this really long, ridiculous rod, not catching anything. And I was like, I wonder what that's all about. And I kind of filed it away, but as a kid, didn't pay too much attention to it, which was probably not a bad thing. And then later I came to the University of Georgia, and some friends invited me to go camping with them. And we went up to the North Georgia mountains, which I didn't even know existed at the time. And all of a sudden there's crystal clear trout streams everywhere. And I thought when I left Wyoming, I'd left all that behind, and they pulled out the fly rods. And so that was my first chance to actually use them. I was probably 19 or so, and was just immediately hooked. I always loved fishing, and I call fly fishing for grownups. It's just a little more in-depth and hands-on and proactive, and it just immediately reignited all my fishing passion, and been hooked on that ever since.
That's it. And what was do you remember those first rods they pulled out? Were those bamboo rods?
No, actually the first bamboo rod I ever fished with was the first bamboo rod I ever made. They were
Oh,
just
wow.
they were very distant idea in my head until I made one.
That's it. So basically, you get going there on the fly rod, and then when does, with making the bamboo rods, how does that come to be? How long from there until, kind of that 19-year-old until getting on the business?
Well, I really did everything else in fly fishing that I could think to get into first. Honestly, I mean, I had done some guiding. I was teaching fly casting lessons for the shops. I was doing fly tying lessons, and I always loved bamboo. I always thought they were really cool. I always had an artistic mindset, and I'd read the John Gierach books and all this, and it just seemed like a really cool way to do it. But I also didn't have any money, and they were this expensive, unobtainable, really cool idea that I just kind of shelved in my mind. And then one day I was getting in my mid 20s and starting to put together a little bit of money, and working. And I thought, man, if I could save up just a little, I could get like an old rod or something and add that to the arsenal. It would just be fun to go out and catch them on one of these old bamboo rods. And but then what happened as I was doing my research, trying to figure out what I should get. And this was kind of pre-internet where you couldn't really get any good information like it back then. So I came across a book called The Master's Guide to Building Bamboo Fly Rods.
Oh, wow.
And it was about 2 inches thick and 60 pages of calculus equations and about enough to turn anybody off from it even being a possible concept. But it just kind of ignited my interest and I got thinking about it. I was like, man, the only thing cooler than buying a bamboo rod would be if I could make my own. That'd be about the coolest thing I could think of, So I started asking around. I went down to the Fish Hawk in Atlanta and talked to the owner, Gary Merriman, who tended to have pity on me regularly because I was a fish head with no money and shopped off his resale rack. And I said, do you know anybody that knows anything about how to make bamboo rods? And he'd be like, well, this guy was talking about a lot. Give him a call. And so I'd go to this guy's house and, and he'd made a third of a rod and given up. And then he'd say, oh, but you should talk to old Jerry. He's a real master, So call up Jerry, go to his house. He'd made it halfway through the process before he gave up. And but each time I would buy a book or a piece of bamboo. And by the time I was into, I exhausted all my resources I could locate. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this. And no matter what it casts like, no matter what it looks like, I'm not going to be another half rod wonder.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. So
yep.
I just set my mind to, and it was in no way a business idea or anything like this. It was just part of, to add to my hobby, it just, I just started collecting books and reading and starting to piece things together little by little. And yeah, so 6 months later, all my spare time and energy, once I had gotten the bamboo and actually started on it, took me 6 months of all my spare time and energy. And I had the worst casting bamboo rod ever made, but it was complete,
Yeah.
So, and then the second one came out a little better than that.
That's cool. And what was that master's guide to bamboo, to building bamboo fly rods, the person that wrote that book?
So that is Everett Garrison and Hoagie Carmichael.
Oh, yeah.
Wrote that. Everett Garrison was really the rod maker that taught Hoagie Carmichael, who's the son of the composer Hoagie Carmichael, who wrote George on My Mind.
Oh, right. Right.
Yeah. So, and he was sort of the pet rod maker of the New York Anglers Club. And so Hoagie went to him and they helped him write this book and really packed in as much as humanly possible on the subject into one book. Pretty intimidating, but it's called the Bible. It's a good one to have. I mean, there's a lot of info in there, and it was enough to to inspire me and a lot of other guys to see if this is something we could do ourselves.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that book. My dad had that old book. I'm pretty sure. I almost want to say it has. Does it have a red cover?
I think there was one version that had a red. It's usually they're green,
Okay.
and a lot of times they're hardback, and they tend to go kind of in and out of publication. You can buy them when they're being published for like $90, and then they'll go out of publication, and you might spend $300 or $400 on eBay trying to find a copy.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But there's other books out there too that are written by other guys that are even more understandable, I think, and a little more modern and make it a little more understandable, the whole process.
That's awesome. So basically, yeah, it's kind of like trial and error. You kind of went through it and just kept building rods. And along the way, I mean, you kind of struggled to find somebody to be, other than this book, to be your mentor. But did you run into other people along the way, or did you just keep kind of doing this on your own and just created your business and rods, doing it your own way?
Well, I would have loved to have had somebody to show me something, but being down in Georgia, it wasn't exactly the hub of the bamboo world, and without YouTube as a guide or anything like this, I was pretty much left to my own devices. So I found 5 or 6 different books on the subject and made every mistake possible. I tried every technique I read about, and I would try one technique, and if it didn't work, or I didn't work as well, or I struggled with it, I would try somebody else's technique on a step. And so just little by little started piecing together through experience and trial and error the technique that worked best for me. And the whole while, I couldn't find anybody who could tell me anything other than the books. And in fact, what I found was the guys that were talking didn't really know what they were talking about.
Right.
And the guys that knew what they were talking about at that time wouldn't tell you a thing.
No. I
actually got letters in the mail from professional rod makers that were angry because they heard I was starting to make rods. And so I was in no way well received when I got into the hobby. It was kind of going the way a lot of the old crafts, where it's very jealously guarded, and yep. they weren't looking for new members,
Right.
So and they were in a large way dying out,
Yeah.
But just like the whole idea of the bamboo rods, it was really being replaced by the graphite rods, and there weren't any or not many new people coming into it, certainly not in keeping up with the number of old guys getting out of it. So I just had to work my way through it. And I think because I was using the books, I was only working off of the idea of ideals. It was like sand until the varnish is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So I would sand and it wasn't perfect. I'd be like,
right.
Man, my rods suck, and I've got to make, straighten them until they're perfectly straight. And I could never, and then not until one day I went to a trade show up in New Jersey was the first time I saw any other rod makers work. And I just assumed everyone was perfect but me, and that was the first time I realized that I wasn't as bad as I thought, as it turned out.
There you go. No, I love that. I love where you've gone with that, with that story, and just being open, and I know you've talked about that before, that's probably your secret sauce, the fact that, you kind of did on your own, learned on your own, but then you were just open. You weren't trying to hide it. And I think that's the struggle. You see that a lot of times, people feel like, they can't share their secrets, but actually that's a good business tip, right? Is to actually be open and share it, because that's probably how the word of mouth got going with you. And then you started into classes, right? How long before you started, like from square one, you're doing these books, you're going to that first show. How long before that until you're doing the classes?
Well, I had only been doing into the rods a couple of years. And when people, and I experienced the same thing in reverse that I had run into, where people would come to me like at a trade show and say, what kind of varnish did you use, or how'd you glue these together? And my only experience was, you're supposed to respond, oh, I can't tell you that, that's proprietary, and I tried that, and honestly, it felt bad. Like I was that person just very recently, and there's got to be a better way. And so when the opportunity arose, and it was not my idea, this wasn't a business I was pushing in the beginning, it was just something that kind of came to me, where people wanted to learn. I was like, there's got to be a way to share this but still make a living, you know what I mean? Still be able to be, it's like approaching a guide saying, give me all your fishing spots or all your, you say no. But what I had to figure out was how I can share and make other people feel as good as I did about the accomplishment, but also stay in business. And that's where the class idea came up. And, and again, I got phone calls from other rod makers. I had one guy particularly told me in 2 years, he said, if you teach classes, in 2 years, we'll all be out of business.
Oh my gosh.
You will kill the entire industry.
Wow.
That's what he told me, like verbatim. And, and I did them anyway. And there's been nothing but an explosion. I mean, we're running around 200 guys a year through here making their own rods. And when I started, there wasn't 200 guys that had an interest in making rods, and now we're 200 a year through here. So you put the enthusiasm out there, you share it, it's only going to come back to you tenfold.
Yeah, that is really cool. And some of the rods, I mean, you've got that unique touch on the rods. I mean, and down to the engraving, right? That's a nice touch that you do, which looks like a pretty challenging thing to do, like with the high quality. We'll probably talk about that in a little bit. I was curious just on the skills, and we've had a few rod builders on this show before, but just thinking about what you do at the bamboo, if somebody's listening now and they really haven't built a bamboo rod, well, first talk about your skills, and then what skills does it take to do it? Do you feel like you had a background in some sort of these skills that would help you be at the level you are, or is this like something anybody can learn?
Well, I think it's a lot like fly fishing is the best analogy, in that anybody can learn to do it. And then some people will become really great at it, and everybody can enjoy it though, So our classes are a great proof of this concept. We bring in people who've never made a birdhouse and never done anything. This is the first time they've ever made a thing with their hands, and with the right instruction and guidance, we can get them through to the end goal, So it's anybody can learn to do it. How well you do it, that's up to you.
That's it. I love that analogy. That's perfect. So, and it's like saying, like fly fishing. I mean, those guys, those guides that are just amazing, right? They've got it so dialed in. And part of it is that they just spent so much time on the water that they just know that river, right, better than anybody else. And they spent tons of time practicing their, casting and everything else. But it's just that higher level, and it when you run into those people. And I think you're that person for the bamboo rod making, right? You just spent probably whatever it is, like thousands of hours now, right? I mean,
it's hard to beat that experience, that comes from. There becomes a point when you go from copying other people's techniques to really understanding what you're trying to achieve. And then just the repetition. And then especially I've learned so much through teaching the classes, because everybody's coming from a different place, and they're like, what about this? What about that? What if I tried this way? And then they'll screw something up and you have to fix it. And all the time you're learning every different little potential path. And it really helps kind of solidify the path you want to be on when you see people taking all these other paths, So the experience is a hard one to replace for sure.
Yeah, that's perfect. Nice. Well, I wanted to jump in a little bit here. just on the process, and we probably won't go deep into everything, but maybe just hit the surface. And I do also want to talk about some tips, maybe as somebody, if they're, into rod building or wanting to get into it. But let's just start with, the class. So and I know you do these things for, about 22 weeks, out of the year. So you're doing them, and you said a couple hundred people, you got a lot of people going through. If I was coming to you, let's just start there, and and I email you or probably email Shannen and say, hey, I want to do this class. What's that look like? If I just called you, emailed you today, would that be something where you got to wait a little while to get in on it?
Well, yeah, right now we're kind of a victim of our own success. We're booked solid for almost 2 years out right now. So we are at the end of this month. So if you got on our website and looked, you'll see all the classes, and every single one of them is currently full. But we are working on expanding, trying to grow the thing. It's hard to be in business, not have anything to sell. So right now it's a bit of a wait, but I think at the end of this month, Shannen will be posting the class schedule for 2024 will be up. And we've already received a lot of deposits for 2024, but I don't know that they haven't picked dates because we don't have dates. It's gotten to where people are sending us deposits on classes that don't exist yet.
Right.
But we'll have those up. So we will have options. And because we book so far out also, we have sometimes things change with people. People will book a class 2 years out and then their daughter's getting married or anything else like this. So sometimes things shuffle. So we also have a waiting list, and you can sign up for right through the website. Sometimes guys retired and they'd rather not wait 2 years, but they can also drop everything and show up in a week's notice if we were to get a cancellation or something like that. So we're hoping to expand the shop. We've got to move some walls around, get a couple more benches. We currently have 8 students to a class that we teach right now. We could easily handle 10 with me and my staff if we had room for them. So we're trying to come up with some more options. But the best thing I tell people is just get a deposit in on anything, and one of two things will happen. If you want to come earlier, maybe you'll get lucky on the wait list and we can get you in earlier, or before you know it, that 2 years, as time tends to
goes fast.
Will go fast, and you'll be here and you'll be glad that you had 2 years previous.
Yeah, exactly. It does. And the 2 years gives you time to, grab the book, grab the Bamboo Rod Building Bible, get caught up. If somebody's going to be coming into that class, do you recommend, if they have some time, to actually, read up on that stuff and be prepared? I mean, I'm sure they can just come there and just do it from scratch with you, but would that be a helpful kind of tip?
I would say really only if you enjoy that sort of thing. Some personalities really want to do that research. They enjoy the reading and the learning and all, but honestly, all it might do is confuse you if you get these ideas too locked in your head, because every rod maker does things a little bit different.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of things. There's very little literature, including the master's guide, that was written by an actual full-time bamboo fly rod maker, because like I said, the guys that are doing it, they tend to be doing it, not writing about it.
Oh, right. Well, it's interesting. The question that comes to my mind on this is that, you've created this class, right, with a lot of people, and you're teaching a lot of people. I would imagine, a book, right, would be in the future for you. Have you thought about, putting that together? Because I can imagine you could probably write the new Bible.
Yeah, we get approached with that concept pretty regularly, and it's on the back burner. But honestly, we are so busy.
Yeah.
I've only recently gotten to where I can work just 5 days a week. And I mean, recently, like in the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 2 kids, and time is a real commodity. So taking on new challenges outside of what we already do with the rods and the classes is something maybe when I start pulling back a little bit, and have a little more time, then maybe I'll get around to that sort of thing. But for now, if you want what's in my head. You
you got to come to class. That's good.
Yeah,
that's good. Well, and so it seems like that's one of the challenges, right? It sounds like you want to eventually do a little more scaling, or add some classes, and but that is a challenge, right? To take somebody on as a mentor for yourself, right, and teach them to everything. Is that the biggest challenge? Like you literally, like if I was to come in there and say, hey, I want to be your mentor, teach me everything you know, that would be something that is like what, almost impossible or very hard to do?
We are always looking for people. We have about a half a dozen full-time guys here all the time. Now, because it is a business, half of those do website and emails and the real business side of things, which unfortunately has to be done as well. Otherwise, nobody would be here and nobody would want our rods. So you can make them all day long. If you can't handle the rest of it, it's tough. So, but I've got my right-hand man, Riley, has been with me full-time for 13 years. We've got, at least one or two other rod makers on staff all the time. I've got an engraving assistant, helps me with the engraving. And my wife, of course, who you spoke to, really heads up the show on the business side of things, and her assistant Cassie is full time as well. So I would love, if you want to come and be a professional bamboo rod maker, send me your resume, man, because this is not something, this has been my life's work for 24 years or something now. I have no interest in this ending with me. When you spend your whole life building a thing, this is why I don't sign the rods. It just has the Oyster logo, because this is, in my mind, this is not a business about me. I have no interest in being Bill Oyster, a famous fly fishing guy. I want people to know that our rods exist and our quality, and the rods themselves to be the reputation, because I want this to go on for generations. It's not about me. It's about what we do, and other people that like me are going to need a home for themselves, just like I did. And I would love to be that home for those guys as well. So the next Bill Oysters out there, please give me a call.
Quick break for a word from our sponsor. Dette Flies, established in 1928, is the oldest family-run fly shop in the country. And I love supporting the history and the great shops out there. That's the backbone of fly fishing. So if you get a chance, would love, you can head over to Dette, give them a shout out, let them know you heard about them through this podcast. They're located in Livingston Manor, and Dette is your welcoming place online or on the creek. Their retail and online shop have a large selection of flies, materials, fly fishing gear, books, and more. Dette Flies inventory consists solely of products that meet every angler's demand for the highest quality and service. You can visit Dette right now. That's wetflyswing.com/Dette, Dette, or you can give them a call, 845-439-1166 right now. You support this podcast by clicking over to that link to Dette. Okay, back to the show. And I'm thinking, like, if you look at Riley or potentially, right, you've got somebody who's been there a while. With your work, do you feel like so you're not at that point really where you can just be like, hey, I'm going to take off, 2 weeks and let Riley take the lead on the classes? That's kind of a little not quite there yet.
Well, he could. And, I've broken bones during classes and things, and he knows them inside and out. He first came as a student here 15 years ago. So he's up there watching the class now while I'm talking to you. And Dean has been here for years now as well, who's upstairs. So they could 100% do it. But for now, people expect to see me, and I'm going to be involved myself as long as humanly possible. But I have to pace myself also for the long haul.
No, I love that. It's interesting, Bill, because I've been, with the scaling stuff, it's, we're obviously going off on a little business thing here, but it's interesting to me. And there's a lot of businesses in the fly fishing space that listen to this show as well. So there's probably some value here, but Yeah, the scaling thing is interesting because you feel like, oh man, you have to be there because they
Right.
come for you. But ultimately, I think that when you teach that person that is as good as you and they're doing it, I think people understand that they're like, hey, I'm not going to be able to get Bill Oyster every time. And the more that you take yourself out of it slowly, right, the better chance that you have to kind of meet some of those scaling things. So no, it's interesting because but if it was me, like you said, I would love to if I was going to do it, it's like, hey, I want to be with Bill. I want to be with the guy who's got the name on the
Right.
rod teaching me. So it is a struggle a little bit.
Yeah. And when I first started, that was kind of the idea. The idea was, if you're a professional bamboo fly rod maker, for whatever that is, you just get a big long waiting list and you charge a couple grand and you've made it. And I did that. I was still in my 20s and I had a 4-year waiting list, and I was charged in a very typical rate as to the best guys out there. And I was working 7 days a week till 3 a.m. And coming up on trade show times, I would literally pull all nighters. I would work.
Wow.
I would not sleep at all. And I still wasn't making anywhere approaching a middle class income. And I was that point, I was like, I either got to get a job at Home Depot or I have to be smarter about this. And it has to be, if I'm going to raise a family, if I'm not going to rely on my wife's income, if you wanted to actually have a real business, unfortunately, at some point you have to start applying your business brain a little bit. But it's been fabulous because I'm not on the grind day and night. It doesn't burn you out. I'm not that cranky old rod maker that doesn't want to talk to you because he's going to be working till 3 a.m. It's allowed us to grow, and the helps of people bringing in other people has only helped us.
Yeah. So that's it. So you're definitely, you're doing it. You're on track, and it's just a matter of, just over time, the more as far as you want to go, right? But it is interesting because when you look, and we're going to dig into some tips, like we said in a bit, but because when you look around the country, the bamboo rod stuff, right, you still don't see these massive, you know what I mean? There's just not these big industries around bamboo fly. And is that just a matter because there's just not that many people interested in bamboo rods?
I think there's a ton of people these days interested in it, but what they find when they get into it is, just like being a career fly fishing guide or a professional fly tire, it seems like a great idea. There's a lot interested, but really it's not the best
No, you're not going to make $1 million. You're not going to make bazillions of dollars, right?
Yeah, there's like room, honestly, the industry is big enough. There's room for a couple of guys.
Oh, right.
And so if you're the best of the best, you can do it, and I'm certainly not telling anybody you can't do it. But if you get online and look at these websites, if you're like Google custom bamboo rod or a class, 99% of the websites you see out there are even guys that say they're full-time bamboo rod makers, which they are, but they don't mention that they retired from their job, 5 years ago, and full-time means they don't have any other job. That is in no way a knock. These guys are what keeps the enthusiasm alive. If it was just down to me and a couple other guys that pay their mortgage to keep the word alive, we couldn't do it, But most of the rods being made and sold right now are from part-time hobby guys that make a handful of rods a year and enough money to pay for their trip to the rod conclave, and they can hang out with other rod makers and share the passion. And it's wonderful. It's important part of it. And guys that come to me that want to get into it and want to get into it as a job, I'm by all means, come on, I'll show you everything, but, so the industry is dominated by part-time people.
That's it.
And it's not because they wouldn't love to be the full-time people. It's just that when it's 3 o'clock in the morning, a lot of guys are going to go to bed and a couple of guys are going to keep working,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you're speaking to, it's it's the passion. I mean, we you talk about that, but really that's what it comes down to. I mean, if you want to do it like you've done it, you could definitely do it, but it's going to take, like you said, you've been grinding and spending, like all-nighters, right? I mean, Jesus, that's like, I mean, how do you do an all-nighter? That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. You've got to really want it. You really have to have the real passion for it. And that's why when I hire guys to work here, the biggest thing, honestly, that I look for is real fish heads, like guys that I realize aren't going to do anything else. They have no option to do anything else, not because they couldn't, but because they, Riley's a great example. Both his parents are doctors. He flunked out of college 3 weeks in because he was spending all his time fishing.
Exactly.
I mean, he has all the potential in the world, but he's flipping burgers and fishing because he just can't help himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's I'm going to do it anyway, but I also have to eat. And I find that in the fly fishing industry, those are the guys that make it long term, because there's much better ways to make a living. And then you can hire a guide and go and catch all the big fish, and, let somebody else make your rod, go fishing, man. But for some people, you've got to be nothing but being around it 24/7 will do. And that's the way I am. And that's the way my whole crew is.
That's perfect. Well, let's just jump into, and again, on the process, and we'll kind of just zip through it. And we've talked about this. I'll put some links to old episodes we've had with some other rod builders. But so we talked about getting on. So let's say, we're 2 years, fast forward 2 years, and now I'm coming into your class. And first of all, what time of year, when do you do these 22 weeks?
We do them all year round.
Okay.
We try not to do them back-to-back weeks if possible, because they're 6 days long and we've got to set up and take down in between, So basically about every other week we do a class 12 months a year. Because we're in North Georgia, we've got trout, we've got the mountains, but we also are accessible 12 months a year. We're not snowed in. We have guys flying from the Atlanta airport from all around the world. We got a guy upstairs right now, flew in from England, and we get guys from Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, and they can fly into the Atlanta airport. We can have a car service, pick them up, bring them up. They can stay in the inn right on site. We're downtown in the little historic district, and they can walk to all their meals. And, and the car will take them back to the airport. So it allows us, it's real easy to get here, and we can run 12 months a year.
That's cool. And what town are you in?
We're in Blue Ridge, Georgia.
Oh yeah, Blue Ridge. All right, perfect. Nice. Yeah. So okay. So that's the getting there. So once you get there, let's walk through just quickly the 6 days. What's so the class you have upstairs? When did they get started?
So they started at 8:30 this morning.
So they had their first day. So today is Monday. So literally the people come in like on a Sunday, the day before, something like that, and then they're ready to go for Monday.
Yeah, they'll come in on Sunday and crash at 8:30 in the morning. We meet them at the front door, and they come in, and everybody has their own bench. Everybody has their own tools, and you can make whatever you want to make. Saltwater rod, freshwater rod, doesn't matter. And we'll start with a piece of bamboo. They walk into a bench with a giant 12-foot long piece of bamboo on it, and they will do every bit of it themselves. And they, at the end of the week, and so the first 3 days, they'll make the blank of the rod, the shaft of the rod. And then the last 3 days, they will spend wrapping on the guides, doing the varnish work, all of that. And we're dip varnishing, doing it the traditional way. And they'll get 3 coats of varnish on it. And they'll finish up Saturday night. And Sunday morning, they can take the thing fishing. It's ready to go. Slap a reel on it and fish it.
That's it. They're ready to go. When you look at the process in those 6 days, and you think, if you had to say, some tips on when, you're talking, so people are doing it, are there some things that stick out to you? Like, hey, these are some tips that I'm going to tell those people, or is it always changing? Like if somebody starts, one person's doing it up there, does it vary a lot on how they do it, or is it exactly kind of like you do it each time?
We have a real program, a step-by-step formula. So basically, we've taken an extremely complex project and broken it into its tiniest pieces, and we cut out all the fat, and we just focus on the techniques, the things that really matter the most about that one little step. And we demonstrate it. We talk about what we're going to do, why. We demonstrate it. We've got close-up cameras and big screen TV, so you can see every little detail. We have Q&A, and then we get you working, and you really just focus on it. It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. We just focus on that one little bite. And through the years, and through thousands of students we've learned where their most common mistakes are, what things they should really focus on. And those are the things we really emphasize, So the rods that they're bringing out are so far beyond the early rods that I was making even, it's shocking. So, but yeah, we just eat that elephant one bite at a time. And
yeah, that's awesome. And so I love the mistakes, because that's a good way to look at this. Like, people are doing it. Can you talk about some of those common mistakes that people are making when they're building? Because obviously we can go through the whole process. We won't cover all that today, from splitting the bamboo to, kind of heating it up and all that. But when you think of the steps like this class up here for the next 6 days, are there a few top mistakes that always come up?
Yeah, I would say one of the big days we're got to be on the edge of our seats is planing day. So if anybody doesn't realize, each section of the rod is made with 6 individual strips of bamboo, and they're planed into triangles, and then they're tapered fat to thin. So we're running a block plane down a steel jig called a planing form to give it its action. And we have to plane within 1/1000ths of an inch tolerances. So it's extremely fine. And if you think about the tip of a fly rod and you divide the size of that delicate little tip by 6, that's how fragile these little strips are that you're block playing down.
Wow.
So, and we're 3 days into the process at this point when you're planing these strips, and breaking one of those guys is always it's the real pucker factor there, because it's a long way back to bring up a brand new strip from scratch and catch it up. So we always tell people, this is the big screw up you got to watch out for on this step. This is the one that's, somebody always breaks the tip. Don't be that guy, So we try to really emphasize your danger points. We've had guys that just got back from the Middle East. They say, like, I wasn't so scared over there as I was planing these strips out. But but we get them through it. The dirty little secret is, if they do have an accident, if they do break something, if they do, you'd really have to get creative to make a mistake we haven't seen before.
Oh, right.
And we know exactly how to fall back, regroup, and get you back on track, So yeah. Everybody gets there. We don't send anybody home with part of a rod.
Gotcha.
I learned that real early on. As soon as you leave a week here, class or life gets in the way, especially if you've been gone for a week. So we don't send people home with rods that are almost done.
No.
All you got to do when you leave here is go fishing.
That's perfect. So, well, and the days wise is kind of interesting too, to think about what's going to be done each day, because I've built some rods, and I love that you're doing this thing in 6 days. So, like, if you take day one, so like you said, you got this 12-foot chunk of bamboo. What does day one look like? What do they do? What are they starting? What they start with? What's the end of the day look like on day one?
So the end of the day, you've got your rods, your bamboo has been flamed, the nodes filed, which will only mean anything to other bamboo guys, but you flame it, you file the nodes.
Basically cleaning up the rod, getting the nodes off, and then also the flaming gives it its strength, right?
Yeah, and really even more than that, it's going to affect the color. Right. So the bamboo, of course, is yellow, and if you want a brown rod, hit it with the blowtorch. And then we'll split it into all of its little 1/4 inch wide strips, and that'll all be done by lunchtime. And then after lunch, we're going to take those strips. We're going to figure out which ones you want to use in the rod. We're going to figure out what position they each should land in your final product. And then you can take those sections, cut them to length, remove the enamel, and get them ready to run through the beveler. And the rough beveler is which is something they'll do the following morning, which it just puts a rough triangle on them, no taper or anything like that. It just takes your square strips and puts them into a roughly triangular shape. But so the first day, you've got all your strips that are going into your rod. They're all cut to length. They've all been prepped on the outside, and they're ready to start straightening out when you come in on Tuesday morning.
Yeah, that's it. Straighten out. And the beveler is interesting because I know in one of the episodes we had, I'll put a link in there. We had the folks from Tom Morgan Rodsmiths on to tell the story. And Tom, I'm sure you know some of the history there. But I think was the beveler, didn't he have a tool that he created that was something pretty impactful in kind of the rod building for bamboo rods?
He had and still has. I would imagine you could still buy the things. I'm certain. I would imagine because I think the company is still continuing.
Yeah.
The Tom Morgan Handmill, it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And it is it's a hand push plane that has two cutting teeth in it that you push it, and they're like scraper blades, and they take two cuts at a time and maintain that 60-degree angle. And it's a really cool tool. I've used it. I've made it early on. I tried it, made quite a few rods with it, and it's a neat tool. For me, I think the big thing when I started teaching the classes, every book out there is going to show you how to do this with a block plane. And personally, I just prefer it. It's not that it's a better job or anything. It's just a different tool, and it's an older way of doing it. And
gotcha.
It's nice to push a block plane and take that curl off of there. And so that's the way we do it when we do all of our tapering. But a great tool, and Tom Morgan, what a treasure of a guy there he was. So
yeah. Yeah, he created a pretty nice rod as well, right?
Yeah, and that's guy's just a lifelong enthusiast. You know what I mean? Just somebody that never got over it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing story there with that. So I'll get a link out to that in the show notes as well. But let's keep going here. So day 2, you start off. You mentioned, let's start with day 2. So you start off at day 2. How do you start off, and then how's day 2 end?
So day 2, you've got all your little strips, and we're ready to be straightened. And that's what we'll do. We'll get in over a flame and vices. And the nice thing about bamboo is you can heat it and it will relax, kind of like plastic or something. And you can reposition it, and then it'll cool and it'll hold that new shape. So we'll straighten the thing out. Once we get them straight, we'll run them through that rough beveler. They'll get tempered in the oven, and we'll set up our planing forms, get ready, basically do everything short of the planing, which brings us to day 3.
Short of the planing, gotcha.
Yeah, and day 3 is when we'll come in, and the day 3 is dedicated to actually planing your tapers into the rod, and finishing all of your strips. And then at the end of the day, you'll glue those strips into a blank. So, and bind them with string. So by the end of day 3, everybody's got their glued up blank on their bench, and it will dry overnight when they come in for day 4.
When you're gluing it, what's the most challenging part of that? Is that pretty simple, or is that a tough part?
Well, we bind by hand instead of using a binding machine like a lot of guys do. And I much prefer it. I get better results that way, I feel. But it's a hand process. So it's up to you it can go really well, or it can go more poorly. So it's all about controlling the tension as you go and still working quickly because of the glue. And we've got to get it straight in time. So, but we get everybody through it. Like I said, we'll have one of us right there with you when you go through the glue up process, because things got to move pretty quick. so we can get it where it needs to be in time to get the strongest bond. But we bind it up and down by hand and straighten by hand and by eye, and are able to achieve better results that way than any kind of tool or anything that I've come across yet.
Perfect. All right. And then, so now that gets the rod to basically the rod's about done. Is day 4? What's that look like when you start off day 4?
Day 4 is when we actually start turning that blank into something usable. So we've got to get all the string and the glue off of it from where we bound it up. And we got to start getting your hardware on, your ferrules, figure out how your sections are going to join, do all the little things. You'll make your own grip. So we'll glue 1/2-inch cork rings directly onto the blank of the rod. And then you'll spin that blank in the lathe and shape your own grip however you want it to be. Basically, it's all those little things: prepping the guides, choosing your thread color, getting ready to wrap your guides in place, which is day 5.
Yep, that's day 5. So the rod wrapping. Yep.
Yeah, and day 5 is pretty much dedicated entirely to wrapping on those guides. We use the traditional silk thread. It's very fine, very small and delicate, and it takes most of the day for people to really get them the way they want. If they've got extra time, they can do all their decorative trim wraps. You choose any colors and things like that you want. And then we will apply the first coat of finish directly onto the thread. The last thing we'll do that evening. So that's Friday evening. And then the rods will go into the varnish in the middle of the night. It's the only thing that we'll do for you is we're just lowering them into the tube of varnish. We do a dip varnish method, which is where you immerse the whole rod into the varnish vertically, and then a little electric motor pulls it out just about 3 inches a minute. So extremely slowly, section by section. So, and we used to even have the students do that, but we had we had a student once slip and fall into a bunch of freshly varnished rods. So
God.
We'll dunk them for you. There's no big mystery there.
Yeah.
It happens all day Saturday as well. So you get to see that exactly how it works. But all we're doing is lowering in, putting them on the clip and hitting the switch.
How would you do that if you didn't have a dunking tank? How would you do your varnish?
Yeah, a proper varnish room set up for dip varnishing is pretty elaborate, and honestly not really worth doing unless you were really, going to be selling the things and being really, really particular about it. So, but you could get out, once you got the blank made, you can get out the old Home Depot foam brush and can of varnish and just brush coat the thing. We've done it with prototypes. One-piece rods that we couldn't fit in the varnish room. The trout rod I fish the most is a one-piece, and I just brushed it with a foam brush and sand and steel wool between coats, get a nice coat going, and then you can just wrap on your guides and coat the guides themselves separately. And it's not quite as fine as uniform a finish as if you had dip varnished the whole thing, but certainly very serviceable, and you can make look very nice as well. And there's guys, even professionals, that do it in a similar way to that. So there's lots of ways to skin this cat. Yep. Nobody's right and wrong. You can do it however makes you happy,
That's right. Okay, so you get that, and then day 6 is kind of cleaning up. What's that look like?
Day 6, you come in, and it's all about, we're really trying to get that varnish as nice as we can. So we're going to get 2 more coats of varnish on that Saturday, the 6th day. And so you do all your prep work. We're sanding and steel wooling and cleaning, and we'll spend about 2 hours getting it ready for its next coat of varnish in the morning. And then you'll have a little break, 4-hour break. A lot of guys will go fishing. We've got some private waters up here where they can book a day and just go in and whack some big fish, and if they want to, and kill their 4 hours. And then we'll meet back in the afternoon, and we'll do it again. A lot of sanding and steel wooling and cleaning, and then at that point you'll also sign your rod. whatever you want to write on your rod, put your name on it. We'll glue the real seats on and get them into their next coat of varnish. And at that point, your work on the rod is done at that afternoon session. But we need time for that varnish to dry. And so we cut everybody loose, and a lot of times go out for a celebratory dinner and drinks and relax a little bit and reward themselves for a long week. And we'll meet up at 8:30 that evening to see what everybody's done all week. We'll have all your rods displayed out, and we'll get together, talk rod care, how to take care of it, take some photos, and say our goodbyes.
Today's episode is sponsored by LakeLady Rods, building distinctive custom rods, each created one at a time. Custom built to be the most sensitive tool an angler could ask for, LakeLady uses top-of-the-line products and components, and I can definitely attest to the LakeLady quality. I've been using the 4-weight, the 9-foot 4-weight for trout. It's been great. I recently had it on that Stillwater trip. We were casting sinking line out there. It was great. It felt like I could shoot it a country mile, so it was really cool to have that. And while we were floating across the lake, I could always steer at the rod, and the great craftsmanship as we were going. You know, the handle, the jungle cock inlays, all the little fine finishing touches and quality that Chris provides in each rod. I want you to connect to LakeLady right now. He's got the passion and a promise going on that you can't resist. You will get the most unique custom rod you have seen this year. Check him out right now. That's wetflyswing.com/LakeLady, LakeLady, to support this podcast and a great rod company now. So when you look at those rods, they're laid out on, the last day, and you've got 8 different rods, right, sitting there.
Yeah.
I mean, like the worst versus the best. I mean, is it obvious, or do they all look pretty similar?
I think to the untrained eye, it would really be hard pressed to say this one's better than that one, or you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
I'm honestly amazed at the results that we're getting out of here. I feel like we've just fine-tuned the process so well that, like I tell the students, we're always aiming for the center of the bullseye. But even if you hit the edge of the bullseye a few times, you're still in good shape,
Gotcha.
So, to me and Riley and Dean and the guys here, we could look at one and we could see things.
Yeah.
But it is, if you just learn this on your own, we are putting people years ahead on the spectrum of where they would be doing it the hard way, which is how I did it.
That's right. And part of that, we mentioned at the start, the engraving, that's kind of a cool part of it because you had that finishing touchdown on. Was it usually just on the reel seat butt, or sometimes you engrave the whole reel seat? Talk about that a little bit. How you're engraving, is that something that historically on old rods you would see a lot, or is that something unique to what you do?
We try not to do anything that doesn't have historical precedent because, we want them to be modern, functional. Our actions are much more modern than the old buggy whip style. We make a lot of saltwater rods, which are fast action. We've got a tremendous 12-weight tarpon rod, but so they're updated to a degree. But the engraving, the rattan grips, the swelled butt with the inserts, all of these things have a historical background. Now, maybe they didn't do a lot of them, but the big companies all did them for their special rods, or their higher end models. And our niche, I figured out early on, I wasn't I loved the idea of what if I could make them cheaper, and more accessible to people. I loved that concept because I couldn't afford an expensive rod. But what I found really quick was I wasn't fast. I was good at it, but I wasn't fast at it. And I was too meticulous and too much of a perfectionist that I couldn't, speed of production was not going to be my strong suit.
Yeah.
But what I could do with my art school background and is do it to a very high level. And And then I just hoped that there was a market for that. And fortunately for me, there was, and that higher end has kind of become our niche. So if you want a really basic rod, we can absolutely make you one of those. A lot of our saltwater rods, just real simple, real basic. And I think will still be of extremely high quality compared to what else is out there. But if you want a really fancy, heavily customized rod, we're by far the place to go, because that is a real focus. So the engravings, we do any part that's metal on it, the entire reel seat, the ferrules. We do gold inlay. We do sculpted scenes, dog portraits, just about anything you could imagine. They're banging out nodes upstairs right now.
Yeah. So what is that? So now describe. This is pretty awesome. This is like, I love this, because normally I'd be like, hey, let's get rid of the noise in the background, but because they're building the rod, so they're on day one and they're actually the nodes. So where are they at? The nodes are the bamboo actually has these little bumps in it, right? Talk about what they're doing there.
So the ridges you see on the outside of the bamboo are what we call nodes, which are supporting diaphragms on the inside of the bamboo, just little discs that are in this hollow tube. So that helps support it in nature. But to us as rod makers, they're just in the way. So we are trying to minimize their effects. So they've just recently filed the outside of the nodes to the degree that we need them filed, and then they flamed the outside of the rod. And now, before they start splitting it into the individual strips, they need to get those internal node diaphragms out of the way. So they're just hammering those out right now, and that's the commotion we hear in the background. We got 8 guys up there hammering nodes. It'll only take them a couple minutes, but they're preparing to split the strips into all the little individual skinny strips. So they got to remove those diaphragms out of the way so the splitting knife is not getting hung up in those as they're working their way down the length.
Yeah, so they're going to split the bamboo into 6 segments. Is that how it works?
They're going to split it into as many segments as they can get that are about 1/4 of an inch wide. So we will only use 6 from the butt and 6 from the tip that will go into your rod, but we don't know yet this early in the process which ones will work for us, which ones won't. We're going to call out any strips with blemishes. You might remove the enamel and find wormholes or watermarks and things that we don't want in the finished product. So hopefully they'll get 10 or 11 strips from each section, and then we'll choose the best 6 in the best section of those 6 strips to go into your rod.
There it is. Okay, perfect. So they're working on that up there, and so I had a couple of things here. Just I know you talked about this before, but you had a pretty cool. I guess you call it the presidential rod. You've made a rod for one president, right? At least one. Can you talk about that? And just quickly, we'll hear that story. I think was it Jimmy Carter?
Yeah, Jimmy Carter was. We've done a number of rods for him, and that's one that a lot of people remember. That was a great commission to get. He's a real fly fisherman. I mean, I've not only made rods for him, I've guided him as well.
Oh, wow.
And he and Rosalind both, they're not there to shake hands. They are all about fly fishing, and they are good at it also. And but yeah, I was commissioned to make a rod for him a long time ago, and this was the idea on that rod was he was going to fish it for a year. So he has a human rights organization, the Carter Center in Atlanta, which politics aside, whatever you think of the political situation with Jimmy Carter, his human rights organization has done amazing things ever since his presidency, and they travel the world. They help ensure free elections, and they go to really horrible war zones and places in Africa and in the Middle East. And but the idea that the Carter Center had was they would have a rod built for him, and he would fish it for a year, and it would all be documented. And then they have a big auction to raise money for the Carter Center every year. and this would be one of their auction items. And long story short, by the time I finished the rod and he saw it, he decided that they would be commissioning for a new rod for the auction because that was going to be his rod. And so he kept that. He liked it so much, he kept it and used that. And then every so often they will again commission us to make another rod that he will still present at the auction, and has raised many hundreds of thousands of dollars for the Carter Center. So it's a neat thing to be involved with. And
wow,
it's it's a pretty cool deal.
That is cool. Yeah, I think Carter is 97 years old, I guess, and he's the oldest oldest living and longest lived president. So he's done, like you said, 41-year retirement, right? I mean, he's
and the first time I met him, he was really interested in the classes, and he said, and he's a big woodworker and stuff too. And I said, you should really get in here. And well, when I leave here, I'm flying straight to there and flight straight to there. And I was like, well, maybe when you get old and retire, you can come and take a class, So I'm still waiting for him to retire.
There you go.
Old, but he hasn't yet retired. So
there you go. I love it. You just inspire me, Bill, on this to every 100 episodes, we try to bring on some, huge fly fishing, right, person in the space. And usually they're historic figures. We had Joan Wolf on in episode 100, but Jimmy Carr, even though he's 97, I think that's my new main goal is to get.
He would be a good one to talk to. He's quite a character, and talk about a storied history.
Yeah. And he wrote a book, right? I mean, I remember that he's got a book. I think he wrote probably 30 years ago or something like that in fly fishing.
Yeah. He's one of his favorite quotes is they asked him when he lost the election, he was just distraught,
Oh, right.
And one reporter asked him, "What are you going to do now?" Because he thought he was going to be doing the president thing for 4 more years. And he responded, "I'm going to learn to become a really good fly fisherman."
Yeah, there you go. Really, that's what he said. That's amazing.
Yep, and he did.
Gosh, there you go. Cool. Yeah, so I think one thing we do occasionally when we have time is this little trivia challenge, and this one we have going right now is the Togans trivia. So at wetflyswing.com/trivia, we'll have where people that are listening to this can answer this question. But so give us your trivia. So we got a bamboo. We've been talking a lot about bamboo rods today. What is one question that maybe you think would be a good one for this trivia challenge?
Okay. All right. I think so. A good question that a lot of people may not realize is fly fishing obviously has been going on for thousands of years, but the split bamboo fly rod was invented in one particular country that launched that rendition of the fly rod that stood as the world standard until modern materials came along. And so the question would be, what country can lay claim to the invention of the split bamboo fly rod?
Perfect. And we'll it'll make it real easy there. Just open, people can answer that, and then we'll pick one winner from that, and then we'll send out some swag. So that's a great trivia question that we'll get taken care of. Just a couple more here. I think we didn't go deep into anything. If people want to dig deeper into this, and like they can't get into your class, what do you recommend? Somebody comes in right now, they're fired up to build a bamboo rod. What would you tell that person?
I would say there is a tremendous wealth of information on the internet these days. When I started, it was so hard to find anything, but now there's no secrets in the world anymore. I mean, get on YouTube, look around, buy all the books that you can find, and give it a try. It's certainly not rocket science, or I never would have been able to do it. So it is certainly an attainable goal, and just like fly fishing, it's a wonderful hobby because you can learn to do this sort of thing in a relatively short amount of time, but you will never master it. There's always something new to learn, always something new to try, a new place to look. So don't be intimidated, give it a go. And if you fail, worst case scenario, come to one of our classes and
there you go.
We'll get you back on track.
There you go. Perfect. And you guys have actually a YouTube channel. Do you do any like videoing of actually, rod building tips there?
We don't have any rod building stuff on there right now. Our YouTube channel is really pretty basic. It's just a place where we've hosted just a collection of strange videos here and there, but we're going to start adding more and more stuff to that as I'm told to. So Shannen,
there you go.
My wife helps manage all of the online stuff. So I'm not even sure how to get on our Instagram page, but I'm still kind of living back in the 1800s. But we're trying to keep pace with the times as much as we can.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the YouTube would be cool. I mean, I could see that again, like just like we mentioned earlier, the writing the book, having this in some sort of a way for people to, pay for a course online, or maybe that's a whole nother thing, but that would be a cool resource to get into. Yeah.
There's a lot of great potential out there. The hard part about the online is there's so much specialized equipment that you need and things.
Right.
It would still be a substantial investment just for making one or two rods, So it is definitely nice if you can come and go hands-on with somebody that knows the process and can steer you through the mistakes. And in the long run, even if you wanted to get into it long term, we can save you a lot of money and heartache of finding out, of learning this the way I learned it. So
that's it. Yeah, that's a good point. What about on common myths? This is kind of a common question, but I'm just curious. When people get into it, what is something when they come into it, maybe as a myth that they think is true, but really isn't, in kind of before they get into your class or building a rod?
Well, the biggest myth we see around bamboo rods in general is that they're fragile. And, some of the videos that we have on demonstrate that is not the case. They're actually extremely tough, extremely durable. We've landed triple-digit fish on these rods. I'm a huge saltwater fly fishing nut. I do at least as much of that every year as freshwater. And graphite rods are an amazing tool, but one reason they can make them that's so light is the trade-off is they're incredibly fragile, which is why you get the unconditional guarantee, because nobody paid $800 for a rod that's very likely going to break at some point. So, but bamboo rods, I kind of make the comparison like, you're looking at an America's Cup mast that if the turnbuckle clips it, the whole thing falls down, versus a pirate ship mast that can take a cannonball hit and keep on. So they are more expensive. They are more beautiful, but they are not more fragile. You can literally lay it on the highway and drive over it with your truck and pick it up and go fishing. And, in fact, when I go to shows, one of the first things I do with them is I give up my little casting demos, as I first string out a bunch of line, throw it down on the ground, jump as high as I can and stomp it with my heels 3 times. And then I pick it up and I throw the full fly line out through the tip top. And then I say, now let's talk about bamboo rods.
Oh, wow.
Because the idea is that they're not powerful and that they're delicate, and there's not the case. I mean, there's rods that are 100 years old that are still being fished. How many graphite rods are going to make it 100 years and still be used? So that's the biggest myth we have to fight against is every other rod company in the world wants to tell you that they're outdated and no longer practical. And a lot of people believe that. And a lot of our clients will go on a trip and the guide will be like, you can't fish that here, like that's crazy. But I'm a fisherman first. And if they weren't practical, functional fishing tools, I would do something else. So that's why I love to go and put these things to the test and really use them hard. And so that's the biggest myth that we're fighting against, is that they're just something to hang on your wall and be pretty, but that is not at all the case.
That's a great myth. I mean, for sure, because that is something that, you think about. If you don't know about it, you're like, yeah, these things are fragile. But, and these rods now, and I'm sure now technology wise, durability wise, like the glue, the stuff you use, is this rod now that you're building actually more durable than a rod that was built, say, 50 or 100 years ago, just because of the type of glue you're using or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tempering processes, the polyurethane finishes, the epoxies, things that we have now that they didn't have then. And those rods are still making it 100 years or more, and then they've only gotten more durable through the years. So,
right.
So yeah, there's,
it's good to go.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good to go. This is cool. So you got the rod, and this thing is going to be lasting a lifetime, which is, it sounds like, that's a pretty cool thing. And then also that you could build, like you said, tarpon. I mean, any rod, steelhead, any species. Somebody's listening now, if they want to go fish for whatever giant fish, there's a bamboo rod you could get. You could build one for them.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make the rod to match the quarry. We do about a quarter of all the rods we make are saltwater rods, strangely. And probably because of our proximity
location
to Florida, Blue Ridge is a great tourist town for people coming from Florida because it's a real change of geography. So we get a lot of guys coming who've fly fished their whole lives and have never trout fished. So we make a lot of saltwater rods. In Blue Ridge, we can catch trout in the morning and be casting at tarpon in the afternoon by car. So it's a really unique situation we're in here, and it's allowed us to explore both sides of the fence.
That's it. No, this is cool. We try to touch on today, definitely the rod building process, the classes, which are cool. But yeah, you definitely are building a lot of custom rods. So definitely want to note that if somebody wanted to just grab a rod from you, that's something that you guys, you could probably, you wouldn't have to wait 2 years to get, right?
No, we work really hard to keep our wait list to a reasonable time. Like I mentioned, at one point I was 4 years backlog, and that was, rod makers love to brag about the long wait, but the end result I found that is 4 years after ordering, you might take up golf, or we have guys that you might die,
Right.
We want people to have it while they're still excited to have it. You know what I mean? Like, if you want one, we really try hard not to get over 6 months on the wait list. If we're longer than that, we adjust how we're working here to get you a rod. So we can get you just about anything you want, no matter how elaborate, usually within a 6 month period. And if we give you a date, if it's executive retirement gift or it's your big trip to Montana and we tell you a date, we hit those dates.
That's it. Perfect. All right, Bill. Well, you want to give a heads up? And now we're kind of coming into, this is probably, we're July, August. The rest of this year, anything you want to give a shout out to what you have coming? Anything new, or with yourself or personally?
Oh, just squeezing in as much fishing as I have time for myself. So.
Yeah. Are you going around the like destinations around the country, or are you focusing kind of in your region?
I find a strange phenomenon that I've discovered is that if I'm anywhere near home, I'm working. So I tend to do more traveling to fish these days because I can go and get out and go for a week and just fish, so and kind of be away from the work questions and things. So I'll be heading out to Colorado here in a month, and we were in Belize earlier, and in the winter we went to Louisiana and did the big redfish. So I don't get to fish as much as I used to before I got into the fishing business. I would fish 3 or 4 times a week somehow, somewhere. These days, I fish less often, but cooler places. So with the business, it's allowed me to travel. We host trips. We've been to Patagonia many times with groups, and we go to Belize every year with groups, and down by Paraguay for the Golden Dorado, and a lot of international stuff. And then try to slip back out west because, such amazing fishing out there for trout. And then of course I've got a flats boat because we can be in Florida and 6.5 hour drive, and I love redfish, and me and my guys from work will head down and do that on our own as well.
That's amazing. And you're using, are they bamboo? Are you out there? It's all bamboo all the time, all those trips?
Yeah, it's all bamboo. It's not that I have any, I'm not stuck up about it or anything like that. Just what I do. And
no, it's amazing.
And there's no way to test a rod than to get out and use the rod. Sometimes a rod can be amazing in the parking lot, but you get it on the water, you find things are a little bit different, So we try to practice what we preach and use that experience to help make sure that we're on the right track as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll send everybody out to oysterbamboo.com if they have questions for you. And Bill, just wanted to thank you for all the time today, and definitely shedding some light on what you have going there and giving people a little opportunity to learn. I still have a bunch of questions, so we might have to circle around with you maybe next year and check back in with you. But thanks again for all your time.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it.
So there it is. wetflyswing.com/343 343. We'll get you the links, the show notes, and you can check out some of these beautiful, beautiful rods that Bill has going and some of the stuff we talked about. We also talked about the trivia challenge today, wetflyswing.com/trivia. This is your chance to get some swag pack from Togen's Fly Shop. They're giving away swag packs this year if you head over there and answer the trivia question. And if you want to be reminded, the question today from Bill was, what country can lay claim to the invention of the split bamboo fly rod? Great question. And I think you can get this one. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/trivia right now and check it out. Check out the Togen's Trivia Challenge, and you will be super cool if you do. I'm going to get out of here because we got to get on to the next episode. We're going to keep this train rolling. It's like a platter on a sushi restaurant. That thing keeps ripping around, and sometimes you miss that one you want, and you got to wait a little bit as it circles around, and then you're looking at it across, and then it's across from you, and then it's coming around, and all of a sudden you see that one you wanted, and you snatch it, just like the next episode that's coming out here. Even if you miss it, it's going to be there for you. So we're going to keep the sushi train rolling. Appreciate you for supporting the podcast. I appreciate you for being here, and I hope you have a good evening, a good morning, or a good afternoon, wherever you are. I hope to see you online or maybe on the water.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.